friends, it's the Stitches. Today we're going to talk about some of my favorite sewing tools, some of the things that I consider to be essential items in my sewing kit that I use pretty much every single day on every single project, and that my sewing would definitely be almost not even worth it without. I've been sewing since I was about 8 years old, and I've been making my own clothing, full-size clothing, since I was 13 or 14. I think 14 is when I got my first actual sewing machine that was all mine and nobody else's. So I've definitely developed preferences for certain types of tools over the years. The first item that I absolutely have to have is a pair of 8-inch knife edge fabric cutting shears. These are my gingers. These ones have a couple dull spots on them. You need to send them in to get them sharpened, but luckily the ginger company will take any pair of gingers in. It's not even that expensive, I think, to send them in and get them sharpened. I also really like that these come with their own little sheath. A lot of home sewers like the Fiskars brand. I think that's like the main home sewing that you can get at Joann's. Ginger, I think it's cheaper to order them directly from the Ginger website, but you can also get them at Joann's. I think this pair of scissors is like $60 or $70. Aside from machines and forms and irons and things like that, your scissors are definitely going to be the most expensive part of your kit, especially if you want a pair that's actually going to last you a long time. Next, aside from your fabric scissors, you also want a pair of paper scissors that look visibly different from your fabric scissors. If you buy a pair of Fiskars fabric scissors, buy something completely different for your paper scissors. So this is just, actually this is a pair of Fiskars. But the blade is black, whereas that blade is just like the metal tone. There's also pink and white stripes on this because it's aesthetic. But also, like, I absolutely cannot mistake this for a pair of fabric scissors. If you use paper scissors on fabric scissors, it's gonna dull them out really fast. If you use paper on fabric scissors, it's gonna dull them out really fast. So you need separate scissors for separate jobs. And this is like the thing that you can skimp out on them the most. I think this was like a $5 or $8 pair of scissors. So it's not like something that you really need to spend a lot of money on, but you definitely just like need to have it so that you aren't even tempted to cut paper with your fabric scissors, because they are much more expensive than paper scissors and they get dull much faster. And the last pair of scissors that I absolutely would not consider sewing without is a small pair of thread snips. So thread snips are just little itty bitty. I also sometimes see these referred to as embroidery scissors because they're really useful when you do embroidery. But these are just a small pair that's intended to be super portable, that is specialized in cutting small threads. If you don't have a thread cutter on your machine, you're definitely going to need this to be close by. It's also really good for cutting the ends on the serger. My serger came with a thread cutter, but the blade fell out of it almost immediately, so I have to have these on hand always. And it's much easier to use this to get in close to machines than your big fabric scissors. This is probably my favorite sewing tool, and I've just always been really in love with these because they're just so useful. This is a seam gauge. I've heard these referred to as many things, but the correct technical term is a seam gauge. Also, in some parts of the world, the correct term is a hem gauge, but here in the US, we call them seam gauges. So it's just a little 6-inch ruler, but it has a little slidey bit with a couple little points on them. This is used for getting exact measurements across multiple different things. You just set the little slidey bit on your measurement, like say if you need to measure out 1.5 inches across a long strip of fabric, then you just set the little slidey bit to 1.5 inches, and you can just carry it across your fabric and you have the same measurement across the whole way. My main use for this is obviously hemming, setting pin tucks, setting buttonholes, just anything where you need an exact measurement for more than one specific point on a garment. Just like artists need to have erasers on hand, seamstresses and sewers need to have a seam ripper on hand. This is the eraser of the sewing world. If you put in a wrong seam, if you put in a bad hem, if you do anything wrong and need to rip the stitches out of it, this is how you do it. It's just got a little hook, and the hook goes into a blade, so definitely like don't like shove your finger into it because you'll cut yourself, but it's gonna be a good friend. I definitely recommend the ones that have a bit more of a grip on them. This is a very small one. This is actually just the one that came with my sewing machine, and it's the only one that I have that isn't currently broken. So I'm just kind of dealing with it, but there are definitely more ergonomic ones on the market. Probably the next most useful measuring device that I have on hand is my 2-inch clear ruler. This comes in several iterations. They have ones that are a bit more bendy, but I just prefer to use my measuring tape for bendy things, so I just have like a pretty solid one. But this is just 2 inches wide. It's clear, it's about 18 inches long, and I use this for pattern drafting, and it has lots of grid marks on it. The grid is not only good for specific measurements, but if you lay it on top of a line, say if you need to make a perpendicular line on your pattern, you can easily do that by just laying the ruler on top of it, and then you know exactly, like you can make perfectly parallel lines, you can make perfectly perpendicular lines. Like, it's just, I could nerd out about rulers all day. And then the other pattern drafting ruler that is absolutely essential is a design ruler or a French curve. I prefer the design ruler over the French curve, but both of them are used for various different things. You'll notice that this curve is pretty similar to that of an armhole curve. This is used to draft different curves, anything that doesn't need to be straight on a pattern, anything that needs to have more of an angle to it. This is for getting those really like body proportional lines. And the last measuring item is a measuring tape. I actually had this. I had all of my tools laid out really quickly for this video, and then I decided to do something real quick on the project I'm working on, and I had this rolled up all nice, and then I used it. I needed it before I even filmed the video, so it's not nice anymore. Like 99% of the time this is just like in a ball somewhere. I don't even roll it up anymore. I don't even try it. I just have a hook on the wall that I hang it on, and that's just where it lives. This one that I have is 120 inches long. Not everybody needs one that's that long, like an 80-inch one is usually more than enough. Most people can usually get by with like a 60-inch one, but this one is pretty old. This is actually the one that my mom used to use when she made dresses for me when I was a kid, so I kind of have a bit of a sentimental attachment to this measuring tape. This one's my favorite one, so I got rid of all of my others. You always want to like test your measuring tape every once in a while. If you have a yardstick, just kind of lay it up against your yardstick and make sure that the tape doesn't get stretched out, because obviously these are made out of fabric. This one's got a really nice wax coating on it. It's been plasticized a little bit. So this one's really sturdy. It'll last a really long time. But if you have maybe an older one or one that doesn't have a very good coating on it, then it can stretch over time and your measurements might become inaccurate. So make sure that you keep an eye on your measuring tape and understand that eventually you might have to replace it. For marking my measurements, I like to use tailor's chalk. I just use them in the squares. I don't bother putting them in the holder because I like to be able to use the different edges to get different like weights of line. I usually use the blue one. I also have this white one, but the white obviously only shows up on really dark fabrics, and I don't wear a ton of really dark fabrics. But they usually come in like a 2-pack. You usually get one that's like blue or yellow or something like that, and then you get one that's white. I keep them, so I have a little like drawer set where I keep all of my little small things. So I have them in the little drawer, and then I have a little piece of foam that they sit on top of. That way they don't get like broken and jostled around. I kind of try to handle these with care. They do make this in like a pencil version. I just personally don't like it as much as this. This next item isn't so much the pins, but what I have the pins inside, and that is a magnetic pin cushion. I will say that as far as pins go, I only use solid metal pins. I use like whatever comes in a rust-proof steel pin, because the glass ones just kind of like make me feel like if I'm too rough with them, they're gonna break. Like there's just something about them that isn't very pleasing to me. And then I used to have pins with little plastic heads on them, and I think I literally have 2 of them left. The rest of them, all of the pin heads exploded because you can't use them with an iron and you kind of need to press your seams. I've since gotten these are just little itty bitty, they're called dressmaker's pins. They're the smallest pin that you can get. These are my favorite for just general use because they're small. And then I really like keeping them in the magnetic pin cushion because one, it's you just kind of like drop the pin into it. You don't even need to drop the pin like super close to it, like it'll land in there. Like it's fine. But then also if you drop pins, you can just kind of like sweep this across the floor and it'll pick them all up for you. And that's really nice. And now that we used magnetic pin cushions all through my college years. Prior to that, I was keeping them in like little fiddly plastic little cases, but then the cases would like pop open and the pins would get everywhere, and that's inconvenient. And I got really sick of like pressing them into cushions real early on, because like when you're sewing and you pull a pin out and then you have like that other motion of having to stick it into something before you can keep sewing, like I just like being able to drop it in. It's nice, it's easy. So aside from my little dressmaker's pins, I also use safety pins occasionally. I don't own a bodkin. I used to like a long time ago, but I don't know, it got lost in a move at some point. I just like to use safety pins. I actually have these safety pins, have these big blue like clips on the top so that you can pin, like if you put your elastic on it, then you also have like this cover so that this can't like, it has a lock in it. They're locking safety pins. It's really cool. And then these ones. There are only 2 uses that I have for safety pins, and that's for fitting clothing on people, which I don't do that often. Like I maybe alter one wedding dress for a friend of a friend every couple years or so. Like I don't do a ton of in-person tailoring, but the other use that I have is putting elastic through elastic casings and like drawstrings through drawstring casings, and I find that these just work the best for me for that. If you don't like the safety pin, then a bodkin, but like elastic needs to get through a channel somehow, and that's what these are for. Getting down to my last few tools. So this is an awl. It's basically got a sharp point on the end, and then it kind of has sort of a flat bit for like maybe the 1/4 of an inch, and then sort of like more of a cone so that you can get different sizes of holes. This is intended for putting holes in fabric without cutting the fabric. So you put this through your fabric, and the point is designed to pass in between the weave of the fabric and open up a hole so that you can, say, set a grommet or create an eyelet. Anytime that you want to put a hole in fabric without weakening it or making it so that it might fray or fall apart in that area, the awl is really useful. And then I have my corner press. I actually use this as both a corner press and a bone file. So I use this for sewing clothing, and I use it for making zines, and any tool that can do multiple jobs is cool with me. I really like this one because it has the flat end, which is really good for pressing things and making nice, clean, folded edges. You can use it to fold the fabric as well as paper. It's just that fabric usually also needs an iron to be pressed down. And then it has this curved edge. So the point on this, it is pretty sharp. You know, you can hurt somebody with this if you wanted to, but it's not so sharp that it will easily cut fabric. You can still poke through fabric with this if you're not careful, so you do still need to be gentle with it. But this is used for making nice clean points. If you're like making a bow and you want the edges of the bow to have nice clean points, then this is useful. If you're making like waist ties or any sort of like edge on anything, then anytime you need to turn a point, this will make it nice. A lot of people use the point of their scissors, but I find that that's just too sharp. I've ruined so many things doing that. It's just easier to use the corner press. If you don't want to invest in a corner press like this, a chopstick is also a pretty good thing to keep that fulfills the same purpose. And then my last tool is actually something that I made myself because I don't really like the ones that are presently on the market as much, so I made my own. But this is a miniature version of a pressing ham. So I have the side I made out of some unbleached muslin, and then the side is just some fleecy material. This is used for pressing things. If you need to press a specific area, like say the top of the sleeve, or just a part of a garment that's a bit harder to get to, or a part of a garment that's more rounded. If you need to iron a curved seam, this makes the job a million times easier. The fleecy edge is better for steamed garments, whereas the harder muslin edge is better for just a really, really hot iron. So this is also, it's best if they're really, really solid. You want one that's basically as firm as you can possibly get it. This I stuffed up with a bunch of fabric scraps, and you would be amazed at how many fabric scraps I fit into this. I put maybe like 6 months of fabric scraps in this one tiny little cushion. I just use a rotary cutter to chop up the fabric really fine. A lot of pressing hams are actually filled with wood shavings and stuff like that. They usually don't have any sort of polyfill inside of them because, again, you want this to be really hard and you want this to be able to take a lot of heat because it's for ironing things, so you're gonna be just repeatedly putting hot stuff on it and not really like giving it a ton of time to rest because it's literally all this is used for. But yeah, this is my baby. This is my little homemade pressing ham. I prefer the pressing ham over the sleeve roll. I kind of use the ham for both, and since it's small, this fits into most sleeves, which is why I like the miniature version of the ham, because I think this shape just has a lot more uses, but that's just my preference. If you don't really have a preference yet and you're just starting, pressing hams and sleeve rolls, like combined, you might spend $30 on both of them. You might even spend less than that. So definitely invest in both, see which one you like. Definitely a lot easier to iron more complicated seams with the aid of some sort of pressing cushion. And those are my sewing kit essentials. If I were to, you know, lose my entire life in a fire or something, like if everything in my house disappeared and I had to restart and like got like a dress form and a sewing machine as a gift and I just had to invest in my tools, these are the things that I would invest in first. That's all for today. I hope everybody has a good day. I hope everybody found this helpful, and I will see you all next time. Bye!